Welcome back to Inside City Hall, where we are continuing the focus on Donald Trump's victory at the Supreme Court today. Joining me now to talk about that and much more are the members of this week's Consultant Corner. Democratic consultant Tess McCrae previously worked in the state Senate Majority Leader's office up in Albany. And joining us is Democratic consultant Austin Shafran as well. Thank you both for being here. And Tess, let me start with you. The ruling means that Donald Trump will be on the ballot. That plus Super Tuesday, plus the State of the Union. It's going to be a busy week for President Biden. What would you advise the president to touch on during his State of the Union address from a political standpoint?
I think that President Biden is doing a fine job so far at really hitting the points he needs to. I mean, top topics of concern are affordability and pricing. He's done a lot of great work on that. I think he needs to do a better job at touting it and really claiming that as a victory. And I think even more so, what he's doing a great job is allowing the lower ticket candidates to distance themselves from him, whereas you have Donald Trump, who's pretty much a tyrant and commanding Republicans stand by him and stand by him loyally, endorse him, and the whole the whole thing. And Biden is very clever and allows those candidates running who may find that endorsing Biden or getting Biden's endorsement would prove problematic for them. He lets them keep that space, and I think he should definitely continue to do so.
You know what I can't figure out, Austin, is why they don't talk about the economy every day. I mean, under almost any metrics you want to look at, whether it's low unemployment, inflation that's actually coming down, record high indexes in the stock market, it seems like a pretty good economy. And Democrats, and the fact that Republicans want to change the subject to, the border or something else tells you shouldn't necessarily play the other guy's game, right?
Right. Well, it's still the economy, stupid, right? We heard that under Clinton. It's the same 30 years later. And it's the affordability moment and what the president has been doing, increasing jobs, bringing down inflation, keep pounding away at the affordability argument. People are going to vote with their pocketbooks. And if they see the country continue to trend in the right direction, then Joe Biden stands a really good chance.
And what about the defensive democracy argument? That was in some ways the original argument that Joe Biden said was his reason for running for president 4 years ago. Today's ruling, as well as some of the upcoming cases, as well as the footage from January 6th, all suggest that it's a live issue. Is it one, though, that moves voters? Is it one that he should be focusing on again?
Well, I think first, step back, like Supreme Court very, very, very rarely intervenes in presidential elections. They still have sticker shock from Gore v. Bush. So like the fact that they didn't get involved here and they said, hey, we're washing our hands of this, we're going to let the voters decide. I think we've all come to grips with the fact that Donald Trump's going to be the Republican nominee. Joe Biden has his work cut out for him, but he has a roadmap, he has a plan, and he actually has a record of accomplishments to stand on. And if he keeps saying, look, things were not better when Donald Trump was president, look at what I've done in the 4 years since, then that's going to be the path that he hopefully takes to re-election.
But see, that's what Austin just laid out is what you would do in a normal election. I guess what I'm raising is the issue of whether or not Biden should do what he did or attempted to do 4 years ago, which is effectively disqualify Donald Trump and say, this isn't a normal election. This might be the last election if you let this guy do what he says he's planning to do.
Yes, and I think you're going to hear a lot of that as we get closer and closer to Election Day. I think it moves voters a great deal, but I think also what voters want to see is that someone is going to get the job done. I think what we saw in the New York 3 special recently was that voters were responding to this talking point of, look, I don't care who's going to work with me. I want to actually get things done instead of doing political theater, instead of talking and instead of doing. And I think that you're going to see a lot of that moving forward across.
And is that getting stuff done, is it sort of generic, like without regard to any particular issue, or people, voters, as far as you can tell, saying we want action on, gun control or, healthcare costs or the cost of housing?
Yeah.
Or is the idea that, it doesn't really matter what it is, just please do something?
I mean, I think that the top polling issues are affordability, or the economy, if you want to call it that. Certainly reproductive health is still a top polling issue across the country in all states. Gun violence prevention certainly is a top performing issue as well. So I think the three of those are going to be what everyone is talking about, no matter where you live.
One thing that I know consultants always fight over, I've seen this happen like for the last 5 presidential cycles. There's apparently some gigantic store of money, $130 million, that the Biden campaign has. And there will be a state-by-state, city-by-city fight. Do you buy a bunch of ads and let a bunch of consultants out of D.C. determine the messaging, or do you put it on the ground for people who are going to knock on doors, talk to their neighborhoods, talk to their neighbors, and turn out the vote at the grassroots?
Yeah, I'm always a big believer in the grassroots level, particularly when you're looking at, look, the national election is a series of state elections. And within state elections, it's municipalities and it's cities, and those roadmaps always run through the neighborhoods. And the big national TV buys are great. It may make you feel good, but it doesn't necessarily move voters from their doors to the ballot box and to check the box with your name on it. So I would flood those cities and the states and the folks on the ground with every resource possible. Make sure, if I'm President Biden, that they know what the fear is on the other side if you don't get out to vote on that day for me.
Once again, the most important election of our lifetimes. I've heard that slogan before. And, you know, every time they say it, it's actually true. You know, I mean, it's very important. Let's take a short break. I've got more to talk about with these consultants. We'll do that in 2 minutes. Stay with us. We're back inside City Hall, and I'm once again joined by my Consultants Corner, Democratic consultants Tess McCray and Austin Shafran. Let's talk a little bit about the mayor. Last week, he said that he's in favor of changing the sanctuary city policies that have been the standard operating procedure since the Koch administration. This is after some high-profile incidents involving migrants. Of course, the facts changed, or I should say the facts surfaced, and it turned out that it was very different from how it was first portrayed. Do we need consistency from City Hall on this? I mean, the mayor has, you know, I could find a statement of him saying, I support sanctuary cities. He just made a statement last week that was going in a different direction, somewhere in between. Do we need a solid tone, or can he just kind of skip around from place to place?
Well, I think if the mayor was sitting here, he'd say that my tone has been solid and consistent, and he rode the public safety wave into office, and he probably thinks that he is staying along that same lane and does not see a difference between saying, I support sanctuary cities, I support New York being a sanctuary city, but, capital B-U-T, we need to think about some revisions to how New York City approaches it, given what we've seen in various crime waves, uptick in some of those numbers, without harming anyone's access to city services, without a migrant being able to go to the police and say, hey, I need help for something like this. I need to be able to access a service or keep myself and my family safe, as long as it's not, you know, infringing on the broader public safety concerns. So I think he thinks he's being consistent. I think what the voters want to see is that what we're hearing from the mayor on one day is the same the next day and the following day, within the general tone of we support asylum seekers, but we want to make sure that the city is maintaining its safety writ large.
Right. I mean, one of the missing ingredients in all of this, of course, is due process, right? Because the mayor, many times, you know, if you went speech by speech and incident by incident, really conflates an arrest by the police with crime. Right? So, like, if you've been arrested, that's it. You can be deported, you can be jailed, you can be condemned, and so forth. And it turned out in this particular case, as is often the case, they had the wrong guy. It was somebody who wasn't even there.
Yeah, it was really unfortunate the way it's been handled. But I think from the mayor's perspective is that that's also how voters view a lot of this stuff. Like when they're seeing the headlines, when they're seeing the stories, their perception of what's going on in the city, and we've seen this for the past few years now, is that the city is dangerous, we're unsafe, we need to do something. And I think the mayor is trying to respond to that, because it's not just a minority of New Yorkers who feel that way, it's quite a few across demographics. I do think where you have Alvin Bragg coming in and the way he ran his campaign and has entered office is that he does want to do a lot more of that due process to ensure that he's doing the most to not, certainly not throw the book at people of color or low-income New Yorkers. And I think he's trying, and has been through this case specifically, to not be swayed by what's being, reported in some of the tabloids, but is doing his due diligence, going through the videotape, and in some cases dropping charges against those that he found didn't do anything.
Yeah, I mean, right. The big problem with, grabbing the wrong person and then declaring the case over is that the real person is still out there, possibly committing crimes, which is, I mean, I don't know why that basic question has to be a big point of national controversy, but there it is. We're talking about the preliminary budget hearings down at the City Council. There is a split between what the mayor says are the revenue estimates and what the council says are the revenue estimates. Does it help either side politically for them to kind of be in sync? I'm wondering if this is one of these fights where they're fighting just because it's in everybody's political best interest to have a fight.
I mean, it certainly is not in the council's political best interest to say, yeah, we're going to have to cut a bunch of programs, including the libraries that are in our districts. So, yeah, I think that this is a win for the council to be able to say, actually, we found some more funds and 3K and libraries will be able to be protected. And certainly we all want that to be the case. But I know that the mayor's office has said up front that they're being much more conservative with their pricing estimates. They want to be safe. They don't want to be caught, you know, the 11th hour having to find an extra few million to pay for something and then make cuts last minute. So, I mean, this is the dance that happens every year. It's going to happen every year moving forward.
Right.
And, you know, July 1st, we'll have a budget. It'll be balanced.
Yeah, they go the budget. This year, I mean, with this mayor and city council, it seems more like a mosh pit, more like slam dancing than anything else.
Well, here's the thing. It's like, look, oh, I found $3 billion underneath the couch cushions, right? And as I said, this is the budget dance that happens every year, and it's going to continue to happen every year. I think one of the differences that we're seeing now is the city council wanting to assert itself, maybe more so than its predecessors, as a co-equal in the budget dance process. They're saying, okay, Mr. Mayor, we get to pick the song too, and it's not going to be Billy Idol's Dancing with Myself. Okay? We understand we are as responsible for these cuts that you're proposing, and then you get to put them back in. We're going to have something to say about it. Here's what the playing field should look like. Let's level it, and now let's have a real true conversation.
Let me ask you all about something that's been kind of happening off and on over the last few months, which are the investigations and the federal raids of people who are close to the mayor. The most recent one is Winnie Greco, who's been a top fundraiser and top aide to the mayor for a long time. The mayor insists, as usual, that he personally hasn't been charged, that, you know, and that he told everybody not to break the law. Is that good enough? And at what point do these issues, even if they don't directly implicate the mayor in the form of an indictment, for example, but at what point does it cause real political harm to him?
Crime, affordability, homelessness, migrant crisis, those are still the top, you know, categories that voters are going to choose. Things have gotten close to the mayor, but they haven't gotten close enough that it seems to be a major cause for concern, at least among voters, because those are the issues that voters still find first and foremost in their mind. So obviously, if anything does rise to the level of the mayor's office and directly within his inner circle, then we're having a different kind of conversation. But as of right now, most voters still are going to look at the mayor and decide whether or not he's keeping the streets safe, adding jobs, how the economy is doing, and how he's dealing with the homeless and migrant crisis.
And I hate to sound naive, but in our last minute, could we possibly hope for a little bit more? In other words, a mayor who's actually anti-corruption, as opposed to saying, well, I personally am not in trouble.
I mean, I think he has to be very careful. There are a bunch of investigations going on. He has to be careful about what he's saying, what he's doing, how he's acting. And what Austin said is exactly right. I think voters are not really, for better or for worse, voters don't really, you know, respond to corruption platforms. They want to see that you're dealing with the issues that impact them directly. And I mean, we've heard rumors and people have been sniffing around to call a primary against him. And I'm sure he's going to be, you know, pretty steadfast in acting on those top 3 issues so that he can stay away any primary challenges.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for coming by. Great to see you. That is going to do it for tonight's show. Be sure to join us tomorrow night when I'll be hosting our special coverage of Super Tuesday starting at 7 p.m. We're going to bring you results once the polls close, and then I'll be joined by Spectrum News anchors from around the country for analysis. Until then, thanks for watching and have a great evening. We'll see you next time inside City Hall.